The story begins by introducing the main character, Ivan Marquez. Here he is seen waiting for someone in front of a sports car, but it turns out that the car belongs to someone else, and he is just a parking attendant who is told to look after it. Apart from being a parking lot attendant, he also does other jobs in order to live a decent life. He wasn't a good student at his school. Moreover, he also tended to be spoiled, because at that time his parents were very rich because of their restaurant business. However, life is a spinning wheel. At times the family business went bankrupt when Spain was hit by the economic crisis. In fact, their finances were so bad that all their assets had to be seized by the bank. Moreover, after the crisis, there was a change of currency in Spain from pesetas to euros, and of course this change made prices in the market unstable. Since his bankruptcy, Ivan's father has become an angry man who thinks the world is unfair. And to make more worse, he also became less attentive to Ivan, whereas in the past he had always spoiled him. Since then, their relationship has been strained, and all because of his poverty. Because he was used to living a difficult life, Ivan became a child who was always sensitive to the slightest opportunity. This time, he accidentally saw a poster for Apartments Market when he got home from work and immediately took it as an opportunity. Without further ado, he offered to drive the official for about 300 euros, and he thought this was a reasonable price because he would be traveling cross-country by road. Hearing that, the official doubled his reward if Ivan could arrive before 9 a.m. the next day. Long story short, Ivan managed to get him to his destination safely. There, the official was expelled by his business partner named Anne for arriving late. Realizing this, the official only paid Ivan with 300 euros. Ivan initially objected to the payment, especially after driving for 12 hours. However, he suddenly had a brilliant idea. He knocked on Anne's door and introduced himself. Although he was just an ordinary worker, he wasn't at all inferior in front of a businessman like Anne. Even here, he said he was ready to replace the official, because according to him, the parliament member couldn't be trusted as a business partner and had the potential to commit corruption. To prove her point, Anne checked the deposit money from the official, and it turns out that there are 300 euros missing. As a result, he immediately believed Ivan's words. Anne even offered him a job as a courier for 10,000 euros for each delivery. Getting a big profit, Ivan felt proud of himself, because it turned out that he had planned all this when delivering the official the night before. So when the official fell asleep, he took the money from his briefcase to get the man into trouble. And when that happened, then he would present himself as a hero like he had just done in front of Anne. The next day, Ivan arrives at Anne's business partner's house to deliver a package containing a white mare horse. It turns out that the horse is used to launder millions of dollars worth of money, so as not to be detected by the government. The trick is that the horse is sold to a mafia named Francisco. Then after that, Francisco will pay him with the money that has been promised to Anne, and the price does not match the market price of the horse. After the transaction, Francisco invited him to chat briefly, and he told him about his youth when he first started a business. Interestingly, the first business he created was a photocopy business. But one day, a journalist photocopied a document at his place, and it turned out that the document contained the secrets of corrupt officials. Knowing this, Francisco used the document to threaten them and eventually became a successful way to become the mafia that he is today. After hearing this story, Ivan was even more convinced that he could succeed in this field, as he had a lot in common with Francisco. Before returning home, he greeted the mafia's daughter, Leticia, in the hope of establishing a relationship so that he could become rich. On the way, he was stopped by the police after returning from Anne's house. Even so, he tried to be calm so as not to be suspected. Then the two policemen checked the trunk of his car and found a suitcase filled with money. They immediately wondered how a young man like Ivan could get that much money. Then confidently, he said that he had just sold an apartment to his friend, and because he didn't trust the bank, he chose to receive payment in cash. Hearing the absurd excuse, the policemen immediately arrested Ivan. Feeling violently treated, Ivan finally said where he would contact the Spanish embassy if the police dared to act arbitrarily. But strangely, they just left without a word. Unexpectedly, it turned out that the two policemen were Anne's men who were assigned to test Ivan's loyalty. Because he managed to pass the test well, Anne finally trusted him 100%, and from now on he has officially become her business partner. In fact, their relationship becomes even closer until an affair occurs between them. Then one day, Ivan was a little disappointed to know that Anne wasn't a widow, and that her husband was the son of a diamond smuggling mafia. But even so, their business relationship continued as usual. And after living with it for months, Ivan came to understand the business model he was running. So basically, Anne and Francisco exchanged money from corruption or smuggling, while Ivan became the courier who delivered the money. Then to clean up her corrupt money, Anne would buy diamonds in Belgium and keep all her assets in a Swiss bank. So far, they have only laundered in Belgium, as the country's financial system is easier to circumvent than Spain or other European countries. In this business circle, the key person is Francisco. Without him, the business wouldn't have been successful. He is the one who has hundreds of dirty secrets of corrupt officials, so he can blackmail them at any time. In addition, he is also trusted by his clients to launder money without being detected by the authorities. So he is the most influential and powerful person among all the mafias in Europe. Therefore, Ivan wanted to become Francisco's confidant, and to do so, he had to win his daughter's heart. However, Francisco forbade him to have any contact with Letitia, as he was only a courier. In the end, Ivan realized that nothing in this world is instant, so if he wants to succeed, he has to struggle hard, not by marrying a rich man's daughter. As the years passed, so did his business. Currently, Belgium is no longer safe to launder money. As a result, Anne plans to move the money laundering location directly to Switzerland. And to avoid checking, she will work with an aid expert named Stoffel. Stoffel will trick all transactions to be safe. When the plan was only a month, Ivan suddenly got a brilliant idea while watching the news on television. In the news, he witnessed a speech by a legislative parliament member named Okana, whose face was familiar to him. After recalling it, it turned out that Ivan had seen him having an affair with a woman in a restaurant. Again, he could find opportunities from things like this, and from that day on he always followed Okana wherever he went. Then one day he found a crack to trap the official. The plan was to infiltrate Okana's hotel room, then install a hidden camera to record the affair. That way he can use it for business purposes. However, when he wanted to break into his room, suddenly a security guard caught him. When he was cornered, Ivan tried to calm down and persuade the security guard to let him go. Even if he wants to help, then Ivan will pay him with 10,000 euros. Seeing that much money, the officer was tempted and decided to help him install a camera in Okana's room. After installing the camera, they got the video, and if the video got out, Okana's life would be ruined. Ivan praised the officer's work and wanted to hire him again. Then the officer introduced himself as Yannick. Apparently, he was also born and raised in Madrid, so he speaks fluent Spanish. Before working as a hotel security guard, he had also been a security guard at a nightclub, because he has above-average wrestling skills. Apart from being good at wrestling, Yannick is also dubbed the king of the party and has acquaintances in almost all nightclubs in Belgium. With these acquaintances, he could party in any club for free. And of course, Ivan immediately fit in with Yannick's carefree lifestyle. The next day, Ivan was contacted by his mother, who asked him to come home, because in the last 2 years he only sent money and never came home. Here, Anne also allowed him return to Madrid. Before Ivan went home, Anne gave him a gift of a luxury watch. According to Anne, a man's status is judged by how expensive his watches and shoes are. However, Ivan didn't go to Madrid and decided to go with Yannick to a party organized by Okana. The arrival of these uninvited guests made Okana kick them out on the spot. Not only did he kick them out, he also threatened to report them to the police if they didn't leave. However, Ivan threatened back by showing Okana's scandalous video. Okana looked scared, and in the end he offered Ivan some money to keep his mouth closed. But he instead offered a partnership. In the point, he wanted to open a money laundering and money transfer service to Switzerland, and he planned to open a branch of this illegal business in the Marbella area. According to him, Marbella is a very strategic place to develop any illegal business, including money laundering, because Marbella has many tourist attractions visited by tourists from abroad, so the tourists will definitely spend their money in Marbella and make this area rich. Then when it is rich, there will be many development projects in the area. With the number of projects available, corrupt officials will definitely commit corruption on a large scale. To avoid getting caught, Ivan and Yannick will help them launder all the corrupt money. Okana began introducing them to officials, mafias, and other important people. But as it turned out, all of these people were also clients of Francisco, so they didn't want to use a service that wasn't trusted. Fortunately, Okana said that Ivan was his nephew, so he could be trusted. Not only that, he also promised to ease their dealings with the government as long as they cooperated with Ivan. Since the meeting, Ivan and Yannick started getting orders. As a result, they get a side income in addition to the payment from Anne. As the business grew, Anne warned Ivan not to cross the line, especially if it meant taking all of Francisco's clients, because if he dared to do so, the mafia would surely destroy his life. Luckily, Ivan played it clean and only focused on the Marbella area, so his business is unlikely to harm Francisco. After advising him, Anne decided to go home early, because she has to celebrate Christmas Eve with her husband. Here, Ivan realized that he was just a mistress. Rather than be lonely on Christmas Eve, Ivan finally chose return to Madrid and celebrate with Mom and Dad. Here, he also brought some expensive gifts for them both in the hope that it would make them proud of him. But his father refused the gift, suspicious of Ivan's work. Instead of a warm moment, Christmas Eve was marred by a fight between father and son. His father was furious and slammed the table because of his bankruptcy. Patiently, his mother separated the two of them. She calmed Ivan down and told him that his father had a lot on his mind, so he should be able to tolerate it. Ivan then went to visit his friends who had laughed at his business idea to apartments market. But now they are actually following the idea. Seeing that, Ivan could only smile, because he could make people lick their own spit. Speaking of the apartment business, in 2004 the Spanish government organized a massive apartment development in Marbella. Of course, this could make Ivan's money laundering services even bigger. But unbeknownst to him, there was a special agent who was watching his movements. This agent is Inspector Roig, who has often received cases of money laundering investigations. But so far he hasn't found any evidence of violations, so he hasn't been able to arrest Ivan. One day, Ivan and Yannick are invited to a party held by one of their clients. There, they use this opportunity to offer their services to the businessmen who come. Apart from talking to important people, Ivan also met Letitia. As usual, their conversation didn't last more than 5 minutes as Francisco kept them apart. Afterward, the mafia warns Ivan to stay away from his clients because he's starting to lose money. Instead of following the mafia's orders, Ivan and Yannick left. But on the way, they are intercepted by Francisco's men who immediately beat them up. Unfortunately, the gangsters also stole Ivan's Porsche. Not wanting to lose just like that, the two of them went to Francisco's house to apologize. However, they will continue their money laundering business in Marbella. Francisco also allowed them as long as he got a profit share of at least 30% of the total income. No less important, he still forbade Ivan from approaching Letitia. Although it was hard, Ivan was no choice to accept the deal rather than leave the already large business. Since working with Francisco, Ivan's business has grown and his clients have come to rely on him. The time flew by. In 2006, he changed his status from courier to money laundering mafia. However, Anne was worried that Ivan's ambition was too great and thought Ivan needed a break from the illegal business, so as not to overdo it. On top of that, Anne has just been informed that the government is conducting a covered investigation. The problem was that Francisco and Ocana had been targeted. Before leaving, Anne gave a piece of advice. The point is that money is very valuable, but on the other hand, it can also be dangerous. So she asked Ivan to act more wisely. Since knowing about the investigation, Ivan has been anxious all the time and he is trying to hide all the evidence that could land him in jail. On the other hand, Yannick remained optimistic and didn't want to think strangely. In fact, he still had time to invite his friend to a party to calm down. But after returning from the party, Ivan realized that he was being followed by 2 intel officers. To avoid suspicion, he and Yannick decided to go to their office as witnesses. There, they meet Inspector Roig, who has been watching them for years, so indirectly he already knew what the two of them were doing. However, the inspector promised not to put them in jail as long as they would trap Francisco and Ocana. As someone who always sees opportunities, Ivan immediately agreed with Inspector Roig's offer. After all, if Francisco was caught, then he would become the new king in the world of illegal business. Before the arrests were made, the inspector told Ivan and Yannick to quit their business, then go into hiding for a while so they could have an alibi. Ivan used this opportunity to take Letitia on a trip to Paris, as she didn't want to see her father arrested. There, Ivan gave Letitia a ring as a sign of the start of their relationship. After a week of vacationing in Paris, he finally heard the news that the authorities had arrested Francisco and Ocana. Not long after, the news also reached Letitia's ears. Suddenly, she seemed worried about her father and immediately decided to return to Spain, even though Ivan still wanted to be with her. With Francisco arrested, Ivan now intends to expand his business to other regions. Therefore, Ivan invited Anne and her husband to fund the business. But without thinking, the couple refused his invitation. Because they wanted to take a break from illegal business until the situation was safe. Anne's husband couldn't understand Ivan's ambition. According to him, this young man is a pawn who is desperate to become king. Ivan, who felt stuck, finally decided to return to Madrid and spend time with Yannick at a nightclub. Apart from partying, he also invited women to his house. Unfortunately, this was seen by Letitia, who immediately threw away the ring she had given him and left. On the same day, Ivan was hit again by the heart of life. This time, he received news that his father had just passed away. Instantly, Ivan felt guilty because he had no time to apologize to his father. He then returned home and hugged his mother very tightly. A year later, 2007, the world was hit by an economic crisis that had a major impact on the Spanish economy. As a result, many companies went bankrupt and market prices became unstable. Because of the crisis, Ivan was also no choice to start from scratch again. One night, he and his friends were eating at a restaurant. There he saw a group of Hong Kong gangsters making a transaction. Curious about their business, Ivan followed the gangsters, and it turned out that they were couriers in charge of delivering illegal stuff, just like his job used to be. But unfortunately, when he was monitoring, a gangster saw him. Suddenly, the gangster beat his car. Despite the threats, Ivan hasn't given up. He continued to dig up information about their gang, and to find more reliable information, he finally visited Okana in prison. Here, Okana doesn't yet know that Ivan is the one who got him imprisoned. Okana then explained that the Asian gang was led by a mafia who was an immigrant from Hong Kong. They have been engaged in smuggling stuff made in China. After sharing all the information, Okana asked Ivan to pay for his son's school fees, because all of his assets had been confiscated by the government. Feeling sorry for him, Ivan promised to help Okana's family. After returning from prison, Ivan invited Anne to offer cooperation to the Hong Kong gang. At first, Anne hesitated because the regulations were getting stricter. But on the other hand, she also needed money to open a new business. Finally, she accepted Ivan's offer and immediately offered her money laundering services to the head of the Hong Kong gang named Yao Ming. After agreeing to Ivan's offer, Yao Ming began using his money laundering services, and because he needed help, Ivan again asked Yannick to become his assistant. To celebrate his success, Ivan took Anne to dinner at a fancy restaurant, but while enjoying their meal, they were both surprised by Francisco Cum, who was already free. Apparently, Francisco had bribed the authorities so that his sentence was reduced to just 6 months. At this moment, the mafia already knew that Ivan was the one who set him up. As a result, he humiliated the young man in front of the restaurant patrons, which made Ivan want to beat the mafia. Day after day passed quickly. This time, Ivan's fate is again ruined by an aid expert named Falciani. He is an employee at Stoffel's company who had helped Anne at the beginning of the story. As it turns out, Falciani deliberately leaked all of Ivan's client data to the government, in a report now known as the Falciani List. To make matters worse, Anne's husband had run away with all the money in the account. Inevitably, Ivan and Anne decided to flee abroad. Unfortunately, Yao Ming had sent gangsters to arrest them. Because of Falciani's report, Yao Ming also began to be suspected by the police. Therefore, they arrested Anne to explain what really happened. Meanwhile, the reason they arrested Ivan was to finish him off, because according to Yao Ming's informant, this young man has a track record of having been a traitor. Not wanting to die silly, Ivan offered to move Yao Ming's remaining money so that it wouldn't be confiscated by the Spanish government. He would smuggle it into a container and move it to Hong Kong by sea. Because the solution made sense, Yao Ming immediately told his men to put all the money into the container. Before leaving, Ivan said goodbye to Anne, promising to return safely. Long story short, he could move all the money safely. Afterward, he celebrated his success by partying at a nightclub. However, it seems that luck wasn't on Ivan's side as the place was surrounded by police, and in the end he couldn't move anymore. The next day, he was taken to Spain to stand trial. Before the day of the trial, Ivan tried to persuade Inspector Roig to let him go. In fact, Ivan promised to pay him 1 million euros. The inspector emphasized that not everyone can be paid with money. For him, money only works for people who are devoted to wealth. After making the offer, Roy told him that the person who reported him to the police was Anne. That means the woman prefers freedom than Ivan. But when he heard this fact, Ivan didn't feel betrayed at all, because if he were in Anne's position, he would have done the same thing. Since his arrest, the government began to tighten the rules and arrest corrupt officials, mafia, and couriers like Ivan. At the end of the story, Ivan is interviewed by a television journalist. Here he says that he regrets having committed a crime and that he thinks ambition for money can corrupt people to the core. After that, the movie ended.